of Bosnia sued for it, but his proposal was declined. Why? Because my nephew was considered to be a more suitable match for her. Not because the personal character of His Majesty of Bosnia is scarcely of the brightest. No. Unfortunately, it is usually impossible to consider questions of personal character when a royal match is concerned. Then, if for any reason the marriage of Princess Anna with your nephew was frustrated, the King of Bosnia would have a fair chance in that quarter. He would. The political aspect of things would be perfectly satisfactory. Thanks, said Racksole. I will wager another $100,000 that someone in Bosnia, I don't accuse the king himself, is at the bottom of this business. The methods of Balkan politicians have always been half Oriental. Let us go. Where? To this precious house of Nella's adventure. But surely it is too early. So it is, said Racksole, and we shall want a few things too. For instance, a dark lantern. I think I will go out and forage for a lantern. And a revolver, suggested Prince Aribert. Does it mean revolvers? The millionaire laughed. It may come to that. Here you are then, my friend, said Racksole, and he pulled one out of his hip pocket. And yours? I, said the Prince, I have your daughter's. The deuce you have, murmured Racksole to himself. It was then 9:30. They decided that it would be impolitic to begin their operations till after midnight. There were 3 hours to spare. Let us go and see the gambling, Racksole suggested. We might encounter the Berlin lady. The suggestion, in the first instance, was not made seriously, but it appeared to both men that they might do worse than spend the intervening time in the gorgeous saloon of the Kursaal, where, in the season, as much money is won and lost as at Monte Carlo. It was striking 10 o'clock as they entered the rooms. There was a large company present, a company which included some of the most notorious persons in Europe. In that multifarious assemblage all were equal. The electric light shone coldly and impartially on the just and on the unjust, on the fool and the knave, on the European and the Asiatic. As usual, women monopolized the best places at the tables. The scene was familiar enough to Prince Aribert, who had witnessed it frequently at Monaco, but Theodore Racksole had never before entered any European gaming palace. He had only the haziest idea of the rules of play, and he was at once interested. For some time they watched the play at the table which happened to be nearest to them. Racksole never moved his lips. With his eyes glued on the table, and ears open for every remark of the players and the croupier, he took his first lesson in roulette. He saw a mere youth win 15,000 francs, which were stolen in the most barefaced manner by a rouged girl scarcely older than the youth. He saw 2 old gamesters stake their coins and lose and walk quietly out of the place. He saw the bank win 50,000 francs at a single turn. This is rather good fun, he said at length, but the stakes are too small to make it really exciting. I'll try my luck, just for the experience. I'm bound to win. Why? Asked the Prince. Because I always do, in games of chance, Racksole answered with gay confidence. It is my fate. Then, tonight, you must remember, I shall be a beginner, and you know the tyro's luck. In 10 minutes the croupier of that table was obliged to suspend operations pending the arrival of a further supply of coin. What did I tell you? Said Racksole, leading the way to another table further up the room. 100 curious glances went after him. One old woman, whose gay attire suggested a false youthfulness, begged him in French to stake a 5-franc piece for her. She offered him the coin. He took it and gave her a 100-franc note in exchange. She clutched the crisp rustling paper and with hysterical haste scuttled back to her own table. At the second table there was a considerable air of excitement. In the forefront of the players was a woman in a low-cut evening dress of black silk and a large red picture hat. Her age appeared to be about 28. She had dark eyes, full lips, and a distinctly Jewish nose. She was handsome, but her beauty was of that forbidding, sinister order which is often called Junoesque. This woman was the centre of attraction. People said to each other that she had won 160,000 francs that day at the table. "You're right," Prince Aribert whispered to Theodore Racksole. "That is the Berlin lady." "The deuce she is! Has she seen you? Will she know you?" "She would probably know me, but she hasn't looked up yet." "Keep behind her, then. I propose to find her a little occupation." By dint of a carefully exercised diplomacy, Racksole manoeuvred himself into a seat opposite to the lady in the red hat. The fame of his success at the other table had followed him, and people regarded him as a serious and formidable player. In the first turn the lady put 1,000 francs on 00. Racksole put 100 on number 19 and 1,000 on the odd numbers. 19 won. Racksole received 4,400 francs. 9 times in succession Racksole backed number 19 and the odd numbers. 9 times the lady backed 00. 9 times Racksole won and the lady lost. The other players, perceiving that the affair had resolved itself into a duel, stood back for the most part and watched those two. Prince Aribert never stirred from his position behind the great red head. The game continued. Racksole lost trifles from time to time, but 99/100ths of the luck was with him. As an English spectator at the table remarked, he couldn't do wrong. When midnight struck, the lady in the red hat was reduced to 1,000 francs. Then she fell into a winning vein for half an hour. But at 1 o'clock her resources were exhausted. Of the 160,000 francs which she was reputed to have had early in the evening, Racksole held about 90,000, and the bank had the rest. It was a calamity for the Juno of the red hat. She jumped up, stamped her foot, and hurried from the room. At a discreet distance Racksole and the Prince pursued her. It might be well to ascertain her movements, said Racksole. Outside, in the glare of the great arc lights, and within sound of the surf which beats always at the very foot of the Kursaal, the Juno of the red hat summoned a fiacre and drove rapidly away. Racksole and the Prince took an open carriage and started in pursuit. They had not, however, travelled more than half a mile when Prince Aribert stopped the carriage and, bidding Racksole get out, paid the driver and dismissed him. "I feel sure I know where she's going," he explained, "and it would be better for us to follow on foot." "You mean she's making for the scene of last night's affair?" said Racksole. "Exactly. We shall, what you call, kill two birds with one stone." Prince Aribert's guess was correct. The lady's carriage stopped in front of the house where Nella Racksole and Miss Spencer had had their interview on the previous evening, and the lady vanished into the building just as the two men appeared at the end of the street. Instead of proceeding along that street, the Prince led Racksole to the lane which gave on to the backs of the houses, and he counted the houses as they went up the lane. In a few minutes they had burglariously climbed over a wall, and crept, with infinite caution, up a long narrow piece of ground, half garden, half paved yard, till they crouched under a window which was shielded by curtains, but which had been left open a little. "Listen," said the Prince in his lightest whisper. "They're talking." "Who?" "The Berlin lady and Miss Spencer. I'm sure it's Miss Spencer's voice." Racksole boldly pushed the French window a little wider open, and put his ear to the aperture, through which came a beam of yellow light. "Take my place," he whispered to the Prince. "They're talking German. You'll understand better." Silently they exchanged places under the window, and the Prince listened intently. "Then you refuse?" Miss Spencer's visitor was saying. There was no answer from Miss Spencer. "Not even 1,000 francs? I tell you, I've lost the whole 25,000." Again no answer. "Then I'll tell the whole story," the lady went on, in an angry rush of words. "I did what I promised to do. I enticed him here, and you've got him safe in your vile cellar, poor little man, and you won't give me a paltry 1,000 francs?" "You've already had your price." The words were Miss Spencer's. They fell cold and calm on the night air. "I want another 1,000." "I haven't it." "Then we'll see." Prince Aribert heard a rustle of flying skirts, then another movement, a door banged, and the beam of light through the aperture of the window suddenly disappeared. He pushed the window wide open. The room was in darkness and apparently empty. "Now that lantern of yours," he said eagerly to Theodore Racksole, after he had translated to him the conversation of the two women. Racksole produced the dark lantern from the capacious pocket of his dust coat and lighted it. The ray flashed about the ground. "What is it?" exclaimed Prince Aribert with a swift cry, pointing to the ground. The lantern threw its light on a perpendicular grating at their feet, through which could be discerned a cellar. They both knelt down and peered into the subterranean chamber. On a broken chair a young man sat listlessly with closed eyes, his head leaning heavily forward on his chest. In the feeble light of the lantern he had the livid and ghastly appearance of a corpse. "Who can it be?" said Racksole. "It is Eugen," was the Prince's low answer. Chapter 17